The death of the Khan. I had a dream. I saw my death, and I saw the severed heads of many people whom I know. Those were the heads of our soldiers, 15 sultans and my 2 sons. They were impaled on long spears and put on display at the main bazaar. My head was given to the Kokand Khan. They're taking my head to Tsar Nicholas himself. They display it at the Winter Palace, and I saw many people looking at it, arguing about whose head it was. Some said of a steppe robber, others a national leader, some even said that it belonged to a power-hungry grandson of Ablay. This, of course, is a legend. There are still many legends about the life and death of the Khan. But perhaps the biggest mystery is the whereabouts of the rebellious ruler's remains. Historically, the name of Kenesary Khan was always shrouded in mystery. I think this is largely due to the fact that his end was so tragic. Everything about this old case is filled with mystery and innuendo, but at first all roads led to Omsk. Chapter 1. Where Dreams Lead. Streets, intersections and dead ends in the history of any given space. The Omsk Region Archive. And here is a document with references to Kenesary's head and measures to protect the southern border. Here is a stack of papers dating from 1847 until 1854. It was not an easy time for the Khan. Russian troops coming from the north, China from the east, Kokand from the south. Fellow warriors, let us move closer to our Kyrgyz brothers. These are the lyrics of Akin Nasinbai's song, who remained a part of Kenesary's unit until the very end. The Khan's army marched into the valley of the Chu River, but their relations with the Kyrgyz rulers were far from friendly. In fact, the latter had a collaboration agreement with Russia. The Kyrgyz had 11 documents. They wrote to the Gorchakov administration, and the Russians replied and provided instructions on how to organize the fight against Kenesary. Kenesary proposed to unite against the common enemy of the Kokand Khanate, of course under his authority, as he was Ablay's grandson. The Khan wrote about observing the rights of submission, but the Kyrgyz declined. As a representative of the white bone, a Chingizid, the man was entitled by birth to exercise his authority in the region. The Kyrgyz followed Kazakh Batyr Saurik, wanting to take revenge on him for the death of Kyrgyz Batyr Jamal Kar. When Saurik was resting, 70 or 80 Kyrgyz fighters attacked and killed his army and stole 700 horses. Saurik himself was ambushed and killed. The incident triggered the armed attack that followed and ultimately led to Kenesary's death. At the last stage of the revolt, a war broke out between the Kyrgyz and Kazakhs. The Kazakh army marched to Kyrgyzstan. Spring of 1847. Kenesary entered the lands of Kyrgyz rulers Ormon Khan and Jantai and burned down several villages. He did not spare old people, women or children, according to Kyrgyz account. On his arrival to our land, Kenesary became our foe at once. Last year they destroyed our villages and killed 100 of our warriors. But with God's help we took up arms under the leadership of Sultan Bokeh and killed 4,000 of their people. Warlike, uncompromising and brutal, every bit as ferocious in combat as he was in politics. They say that Kenesary foresaw his own death, that he was in fact trying to bring it closer. Chapter 2. Like in a Nightmare. St. Petersburg, the University Embankment, house number 3, the Cabinet of Curiosities. This has gone on for a long time, ever since the 1970s, according to the head of the Central Asia Department, Mariam Rezvan. Our director has 2 folders. One contains correspondence about Kenesary's head, and the other about the head of Haji Murat. It was hard to keep up with the light-footed and mobile units of Ablay's grandson. A bounty was announced for Kenesary's head. With his brother Naurizbai and 300 warriors, Kenesary was backed into a mountain gorge by rebellious horde members. The Khan stopped in the valley of the Chu River on the Maitobe hill, which was regarded as a bloody place since ancient times. Apparently, Kenesary's opponent Ormon Khan had an inventive mind and determined character. Ormon Khan ordered his troops to descend along the mountain road, which was clearly visible to the Kazakhs, and kick up a lot of dirt on the way. Having descended, they would climb back up the gorge and begin their descent all over again. This happened continuously for 3 days. They say that Kenesary, observing the process, was impressed by the enormity of Ormon Khan's army, which were endlessly coming forth in a cloud of dust. On the orders of Ormon Khan, his soldiers lit bonfires all night on, and when Kenesary saw the fires in the mountains, he allegedly proclaimed, "There are more Kyrgyz here than there are stars in the sky." What is more, just a couple of days before the decisive battle, Ormon Khan ordered to reverse the channel of the river, thus leaving the besieged troops without water. The Kyrgyz army had reinforcements arriving constantly, while most of Kenesary's soldiers deserted to their villages. Then there was another betrayal. One of the warriors brought Kenesary a large army, and then, when the Kyrgyz began to surround them, he took the army and fled. Kenesary was left with a small number of followers, about 500 people, and they were completely surrounded by the Kyrgyz. It is difficult to restore detailed course of events, as the information we are left with is contradictory. Apparently, Kenesary's soldiers fought for 3 days and 3 nights, but the forces were unequal. The Khan suggested they stab most of the horses, load up the remaining provisions and escape from the siege, but his idea received no support, as it was proposed to postpone the decision until the morning. That night, a part of the army deserted in the dark. Having learned about it, the rest of the army fled as well. The night was so dark, making it impossible for them to see each other, let alone try and stop anyone. And what could they have possibly done against the will of God? Despite all this, the Khan decided to try and break through the encirclement across the river with the remaining soldiers, but he was captured and executed. According to one version, his body was torn to pieces and the remains were scattered in the wilderness. According to another, he was buried. There are also other assumptions. According to some accounts, they may have eaten him, consumed his body. Chapter 3. When Dreams Come True. Thousands of folders, hundreds of thousands of documents, millions of lives, a historical concentrate on dusty pages. There's no mention of Kenesary Kasimov's skull being stored in Omsk, no mention of it in any of the documents. With my own eyes, I saw 2 loads of severed human heads, which were brought to Tashkent by wild Kyrgyz as a gift for the local government. The heads of Kenesary's slaughtered soldiers were put on display on long spears at the Tashkent bazaar. Local government was gratified and bestowed presents upon the wild Kyrgyz. The heads of Kenesary's soldiers were given to the Kokands, the Khan's head to the Russian authorities. The reward for Kenesary's head was fixed at 6,000 rubles, a large sum in those days. And in order to claim the money, one was required to present a proof, which was a usual practice of the time. Such was life, such was the world back then. Now it seems like savage barbarism to us. But 200 years ago, it was commonplace to behead one's enemy and send it to one's beloved king. The skull might have been edged in silver and made into a banquet bowl for the Kyrgyz. Allegedly, the head was initially taken to Kopal, then to Omsk, and sometime later Kenesary's skull was in the Governor-General's safe. For a long time, the skull of Kenesary Kasimov was stored in the building of the General Directorate of Western Siberia. There were also the gun and the belt. While the gun ended up in the History Museum, the fate of Kenesary's skull and belt remains unknown. Their traces were lost in the early 20th century. What's the story everyone talks about? About the head being brought here and kept at the border control? Do you have any documents to support the claim? No, of course we don't have the documents. I don't know whether it is a fact or fiction. I think it is one of the legends about Kenesary Kasimov. Much later, in the 1950s, there appeared evidence suggesting that the Khan's skull was seen at the Hermitage, bearing the inscription, "Ashtray made from the head of Khan Kenesary." This is utter nonsense, just like with the throne of Timur. There's no head anywhere in the vaults of the Hermitage. This is the first time I hear about it. Several years ago, a delegation from Kazakhstan came to Russia, representatives of the Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Culture. They requested access to the storage, asking for Kenesary's skull to be returned to his homeland if the museum had it. Everything was disclosed for them, all anthropological museums. They were shown the entire anthropological collection of the Hermitage, the Anthropological Museum, the Military Surgical Academy of St. Petersburg. They viewed everything and found no trace of the skull. In the state storehouses, where they don't usually admit anyone, there are artifacts, items that are considered to be the property of Russian history. They are inaccessible. Some other possible places where the artifact may be stored are the State Storehouse of Russia, State Historical Museum, and the Local History Museum of Samara, where the reservists of the Cabinet of Curiosities were evacuated during World War II. It is possible that Kasimov's head remained in Omsk. Of course, it is a big question, but I think it was moved. Another thing is that something could have happened to it during the journey to St. Petersburg. But there are no corresponding documents. Allegedly, the Khan's head was transported through Tobolsk, so it is possible that there is some information about it in the city's archives. But most of the documents on Khan Kenesary are stored in Omsk, and most of them have yet to be studied. How much time would it take to fully explore all the funds and documents related to Kenesary Kasimov? More than a year, at least 3 years perhaps. According to ethnographer Palashenkov, there used to be an archive case about Kenesary's head and an addendum to it. The addendum was the actual head of Kenesary Kasimov, a yellowed skull with a stamp on the forehead. The whereabouts of this case are unknown. In the 50s, the Omsk archive transferred some of the documents to Kazakhstan. So it is possible for the documents on Kenesary Kasimov's death to be stored in the Almaty archive, or maybe they were lost. They could have been lost. They could have been transferred and set aside in the archives of Moscow and St. Petersburg. Anything is possible. There is another version which is hardest to verify but still realistic. The relic may be a part of a private collection abroad. And suddenly the Dombra began to cry, and an old cracked voice began to sing. Kenesary stood immersed in thought, bidding farewell to his life and homeland. "God have mercy," he said at last, and a moan rolled across the steppe. Doskoja sang it with such yearning that his voice tore up the soul. Unable to stand it any longer, Kenesary dug his spurs into his horse's flanks. The animal reared up and carried him towards eternal sleep.